A 2-year-old girl used as a human shield after a robbery in Vancouver is recovering from the ordeal tonight. The toddler is in stable condition with a broken leg and a concussion. The little girl was in this getaway car that sped away from a drugstore robbery. A gunman used her as a shield as he first commandeered a police cruiser and then this white van during a wild chase.
He was literally described, as I said, as doing a dance through the intersection with the gun held to the baby's head, yelling, back off, or I'll shoot.
So that's another reason why I've been fighting these charges all these years. They made me out to be a real dick, like I took some woman hostage with her kids. Who the hell takes somebody hostage to go do a robbery? How stupid is that? I never would have shot into the air or done anything if she hadn't screamed they're shooting at me. I didn't actually see bullet holes like you see in movies, like tack, tack, tack through the window and stuff. But I do remember looking in the back seat and I saw a hole by Sheena's head. And I just screamed at Dolly, go, go, go. And that's when I put the gun out the window and I shot into the air to make them back off.
We've got gunfire, we've got a male just got out of the passenger seat, he's got a child in his arms, he's got a... Get your phone.
It ended when the van crashed into a stone wall. The gunman crawled from the wreck and was subdued by police.
I have some groups that have expressed an interest in helping me, but I need new evidence. These are things I don't talk about. I've never acknowledged the 60 Scooper residential school.
John Derrick Mills is Cree from Waterhen Lake First Nation.
I used to just push it down. I would usually explode every 6 months in a violent, fit.
Northbound on Osler, one had a gun, one had a knife. Units copy, gun and knife produced. Short fired.
And whoever was unlucky enough to be around me at that time, they would get the brunt of that. And for that, I'm sorry.
He's been in prison 28 years for a botched armed robbery and kidnapping.
10 copy. 10 copies. Someone give me a location where you are.
Our crew at Investigates committed to this correction series because, well, the stats are simply outrageous.
We found, again, terrible outcomes.
Critics are not shy to call the CSC broken, the terminus of a broken society, a broken country.
It is shocking, and it's a human rights violation.
Even criminal justice members are shocked. And in so many ways, they're beside themselves, and they don't even know what to do anymore.
Indigenous people are 25% of all accused, 33% less likely to be acquitted, 32% of prison population.
We just kind of repeat and recycle a lot of the same practices that we've been doing over and over again.
We now have more young people in the child welfare system than were in the residential school. That is a pipeline directly into our prisons.
The height of Canadian racism is achieved in Canadian prisons. First Nation leader George Manuel wrote those words way back in 1974.
So when you start to say that the prison system is the height of racism, I would have to agree.
John Derrick Mills' story is both compelling and unbelievable. He's now doing his time in Archambault Prison, located a few hours outside Montreal.
We got you set up right over here. So.
But he's been incarcerated in prisons all over the country.
Your initial sentence was life.
Life 7, yeah.
Life 7. Why are you still in jail?
I do want to get out of the jail, but I'm not going to admit to something that didn't happen or I didn't do in order to get out of jail. And that sucks because I'm going to be in jail for a long time.
Mills maintains his sentence is a miscarriage of justice.
Possible robbery in progress to 8.
He wants a new trial.
7 Oak Street, Boomerdale Drugs.
June 5th, 1996, Vancouver, BC. Mills is a passenger in a getaway car, his girlfriend driving, her 2 children in tow.
The police car had rammed into us and turned us, like, not just completely around, but like completely around and then almost sideways.
Moments earlier, Mills tried to knock off this drugstore at gunpoint.
Passerby saw a masked male with the staff down on the floor.
Now Mills is in a wreck. A VPD officer opens fire.
We've got gunfire, we've got a male just got out the passenger seat, he's got a child.
Mills makes a fateful decision. He grabs one of the children and bolts.
I saw the open car to the police car, so I just ran for it. I pushed Sheena down flat on my lap, and then that's when I got shot in the head. I just remember seeing a flash of blue, maybe blue uniform or something. I remember just turning my head slightly, and then I remember the glass spider webbing, and then like just coming and then nothing. And then, yeah, there's like 30-some blocks. I don't remember nothing.
10-4 northbound Granville.
He's going about 120.
Mills took VPD on a 36-block chase through Vancouver streets, ending when Mills rolled a third vehicle, a van he jacked after exiting the police cruiser.
Drop the gun, he's dropped the kid, he's on the ground.
10-4 in custody, copy all units, copy in custody.
He's been behind bars ever since. This iconic picture shows Big Bear in shackles. Incarceration in one form or another defines Indigenous relations with Canada. Reserves, Indian agents, Canadian residential schools were modeled on U.S. schools, which in turn were based on its prison system. Prisons filled with Indigenous folk once the original colonial control mechanisms were phased out.
When residential school requirement was abandoned, within 5 years we also started to see child welfare cases pick up, right? And similarly with prison. It's no coincidence that that Indigenous people went from the Indian agent to child welfare and the prison system. Colonialism also went underground, and it's hidden now.
Dr. Vicky Chartrand, a criminologist at Bishop's University, argues this issue goes beyond crime and justice. This is a socio-political problem. Her research found that settler attitudes are not a thing of the past. Modern-day colonialism created this systemic racist institution.
It highlights back to us how we've continued those beliefs that somehow Black and Indigenous people belong in prison.
I don't think anybody grows up and wants to be a criminal. You know, nobody ever wants to play the criminal when they do the cops and robbers. I count all the time taken from my family's in custody. I had a nice life. I had a good life. It was just a lot of happiness. My father, I don't know. I don't know my non-native family. And my mom was so young, she was still living with my grandparents.
And if you don't mind, how old are you?
I think I'm 56.
56? How many of those 56 years have you been in custody?
In jail custody, probably since I was 16. But I would have to, I'd say custody since I was 3 or 4 when they took me.
His memory is hazy. He's not sure where he was placed, but believes it was a residential school.
Where were you taken?
That's the thing I don't remember. I know I was held for quite a few years till I was 6.5. I was adopted, so it's like a 3.5-year gap in memory that I have.
His adoptive mom would eventually send him to another home.
Every Friday she'd stop by and we'd go out for dinner, and she would evaluate my week's behavior to see if I could come home or not. I don't think who I am now is who I would have been, because everybody in my family, they're all like citizens. They all work and have normal lives.
Well, the way we got to this point is what we know, and that is a colonial legacy of removal, particularly of women and children from community, dislocation from culture, legislation, policy that basically took people away.
Jail is the tail end of justice. Inmates easily forgotten. Politicians don't care. Society turns a blind eye. But it hits you in the wallet. Corrections is big business. 13,000 inmates cost $2.9 billion per year. $225,000 per prisoner per year. 1.2 staff per prisoner. Dr. Ivan Zinger is the Correctional Investigator of Canada. He provides independent oversight to the CSC.
With respect to Indigenous people, my office has made in annual reports over 70 recommendations. We've been in business for 50 years this year. Yet you would be hard-pressed to find recommendations that have been acted upon.
And a 2-year-old girl used as a human shield after a robbery in Vancouver is recovering from the ordeal tonight.
We've got gunfire. We've got a male just got on the passenger seat. He's got a child in his arms. He's got a... Get your phone. We're out the 14. He's going to land in the vehicle. Somebody get out here.
Back off or I'll kill the kid. Mills holds his gun to the head of a 2.5-year-old he's holding in his arms. That's the testimony of VPD Officer Grant Geddes. Geddes went on to say Mills used the child as a human shield. Mills denies this version of events. His denial is one reason why he's still in jail and why he will probably not get parole anytime soon.
You know, that's another reason why I've been fighting these charges all these years. They made me out to be a real dick. Like I took some woman hostage with her kids. Who the hell takes somebody hostage to go do a robbery? How stupid is that?
Mills admits to it all, the armed robbery, firing his gun 6 times, but the hill he'll die on. He did not threaten the child.
Car 10.
Car 10.
If they've got the child as a hostage, have them back off.
Units copy. If suspects have the child as a hostage, back off.
I speak to Derrick on a weekly basis. He's a special and important individual. And I don't want to detract or trivialize his case, but I have to be honest is that I talk to quite a few Indigenous folks inside. And so while his case is unique to him, we see that same pattern from what he's experienced across the board with many Indigenous people.
Being shuttled from home to home started to weigh heavy on Mills.
You know, you have your first family you have taken, your second family doesn't want you, and they push you on the third family. So I think for me,
Age 12, he ran away.
I just didn't want to care about anything or anybody.
On the street, raiding gardens, sleeping under bridges and in stairwells, he meets another boy who taught him the art of break and enter.
That had never dawned on me to go into somebody's home and steal their money. I remember while I was doing it, the first thing I would do is I'd go and make a sandwich. I'd go to the fridge and I'd make a sandwich because then if anybody came home, I was going to run, but at least I'd be full.
At age 16, he was sent to the pen.
They try to paint you as this violent, crazy psycho. You can't argue that fact with anybody. You can't, there's nobody in here that'll listen.
Inmates undergo assessments that evaluates the risk and correctional needs of the offender. Inmate Jeffrey Ewart challenged this, claiming the process discriminatory.
Those tools are not reliable or valid when used with Indigenous people, and that is actually compounding the problem and being discriminatory in nature.
Changes came down from the High Court in 2018. Corrections was ordered to stop using its standard psychological risk assessment on violent Aboriginal offenders.
Reform itself is such that you have to wait decades to see changes. All during that time, we have to remember that Indigenous people were overclassified and sent to higher security than necessary and were penalized with the risk assessment that was used.
Senator Kim Pate is a member of the Order of Canada. She advocates for marginalized and imprisoned women.
I spent the first 15 years of my working life trying to reform the system. And then it became clear the system is set up to do exactly what it does. It's a social control function.
In 2019, new provisions in the Correction Release Act came into force. Gladue would have to be considered in institutional charges and parole decisions. Critics say there are unintended consequences of providing Indigenous programs behind bars.
You have things like healing lodges. So it's a prison, but it's a healing lodge. The idea then is that, well, if there's all these programs for Indigenous people, and when someone, like a judge, is sentencing someone, they're like, well, maybe the best place for them is going to be a prison.
I think we've made ourselves feel better about more and more Indigenous people being in prison.
Funding for communities to take on these programs has been available for 30 years.
The service is extraordinarily well financed, and the services, as I indicated in my report, has funneled all the money that was destined for those community initiatives to actually fund initiatives that are in institutions.
Mills's record inside is not spotless. Multiple charges for fighting. He figures that's pretty good considering most of his time was done in Max. To him, his reports do not reflect reality.
They say no motivation to do programs. I did my correctional plan twice. I taught a program, and that for me is the tip-off that they're not answering these things fairly.
In '96, Mills was a free man.
I was sick of that life. I was sick of crime, and I was sick of drugs.
Living in Edmonton, a new girlfriend with 2 kids, an Insta-family.
In jail, you think about having that pretty girlfriend and the kids and everything else like normal people have. And I had that.
They bought an old beater car and headed to Vancouver, broke.
We didn't go to Vancouver to do crime. That wasn't our intent. We tried to get help all day. BC had passed a law that nobody could get social assistance until they'd lived in BC for 6 months. On that day, I felt so guilty that I wasn't able to help them or provide for them. Because if you have a choice between a robbery, starving kid, what would you choose?
June 1998, Mills is found guilty on 13 charges. The judge labels him an extreme danger to the public. Mills's lawyers argued self-defense. A VPD officer shot first. Mills says he was protecting his girlfriend when he drew his gun.
I never would have shot into the air or done anything if she hadn't screamed they're shooting at me. I didn't actually see bullet holes like you see in movies, like tack, 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 through the window and stuff. But I do remember looking in the back seat and I saw a hole by Sheena's head. And that's when I kind of lost it at that point. And I just screamed at Dolly, go, go, go. And that's when I put the gun out the window and I shot into the air to make them back off.
Defense lawyer Donna Turco had asked charges be dropped after police lost key evidence, the getaway car. Police admit to destroying the car a week after the chase. Turco wanted a ballistics expert to examine the vehicle.
Somebody called the newspaper. They had looked at the vehicle because they'd read all the stories in the newspaper and they wanted to look at it. He backed up my version of events, that they were shooting into the car.
In his ruling, the judge noted Mills's previous 60 convictions, that the longest he'd been out of prison was 6 months. That night he was high on coke and pills, and the child suffered a broken leg. But there are discrepancies according to Mills. A jacket he threw away running out of the store turned up in his car.
The police officer who seized control of the car, he testified that he didn't understand how the jacket got there.
Stanford, Granville,
Gun to his head. He's with the child with him.
Okay, just to confirm, Granville and Nanton, and he's got the gun to his head.
With the child. He's with a gun.
10-4. Units copy, Granville and Nanton, he's got the gun to the child's head.
I think in here people just forget about you. So I don't know if it's a racist thing or let Paul know and I'll send you one. I don't mind. I have some groups that have expressed an interest in helping me, but I need new evidence.
Mills' story is a violent story and a sad one. He made his choices, but he also fell through every hole in the social safety net. Both things can be true.
Nice to meet you. The clerks in that robbery, I do want to apologize to them. I think that's important. Yeah. I think hurting them or other people, I don't think. Yeah, that wasn't the goal. So.
What about the child? Like, what do you have to say?
Kayla, I was trying to help. You know, I wasn't trying to cause hurt or harm. For me, that's the key. Everything is secondary to that. Yeah, I am sorry. Yeah, I am sorry that happened.
I feel like me and my sister are gonna finally get the justice we deserve after how many 30 years?
They have had a long history of from residential school, child welfare involvement, abuse, and now, far too many years, more than 3 decades in prison. So it's time for us to act and get them out.
I'm praying to be free so I can live my life now.
I don't have any idea why it would take so long, but it has.
Well, I'm hoping that we can have the two sisters, Adelia and Larissa, finally go home. Really. Yeah, they can finally go home, both of them, and stay home.
Oh my God. Hi. Oh my God. Hi. Oh my God, sister.